Happy Pride, everybody. We are so excited to be celebrating the 2 monumental decisions by the Supreme Court and by a worldwide movement being led by Black Lives Matter to make the world a more just place. We're also excited to let you know that we now have merchandise for sale below and gifts for all the movie lovers in your life. So don't forget to hit subscribe, hit that like button, hit that notification bell so you know when we get another video out. And now, let's go see Steve.
It's Gay Pride, Johnny.
Johnny, happy Gay Pride. I thought for Gay Pride this year we would do sort of a classic in the genre. 1956's Tea and Sympathy, starring Deborah Kerr, John Kerr, Leif Erickson, and Darryl Hickman. This is taken from a Broadway play by Robert Anderson, and it ran for 767 performances on stage. It was directed by Elia Kazan. It had Deborah Kerr and John Kerr in it on Broadway, and it was a huge controversial success. When MGM bought it, the immediate reaction was, great! Water it down. They weren't going to have a play about homosexuality, and the playwright always said, well, it's not really about homosexuality. It's about an effeminate young man at a boys' school who has a crush on an older woman. The rumors that he's gay just prompts the two to get together to prove that he's not. Well, no, it's about homosexuality. He says the word queer in it. They use those terms. It's very evident from the very beginning right to the very end that this is indeed a play about a boy being accused of being homosexual.
I think he is a regular fella, whatever that is.
You're being very generous to say that, Laura, but well, it just doesn't jibe with the facts.
The plot is basically this. He's a very sensitive young boy. He goes to an all-boys school. He doesn't play sports. He doesn't enter into any of the other activities. He wants to be a folk singer. He writes music. He likes to sew.
Well, will you look at that? I used to have to sew on all my buttons when I was a kid.
Can you cook?
Sure.
He does everything that all the other boys do not.
My dad's gonna hit the roof when he hears I'm playing a girl.
I think you're a good sport not to mind.
His only friend at the campus is the wife of the housemaster, played by Deborah Kerr. She's very aware that he's a sensitive young man. She tries to encourage him that it's okay to be different, that there's nothing wrong with liking music, there's nothing wrong with listening to classical records all day long, there's nothing wrong with sewing on a button.
The guy was actually sewing.
Knock it off, Steve.
Oh, look, just because you're his roommate.
Knock it off.
He's constantly tormented. They call him Sister Boy.
Sister Boy can put more twists on that ball.
Sister boy. Never good. Sister. Shut up.
Even his own roommate says to him, if you just would act more normal, and he'd say, well, what's normal? And he'd say, like we are.
You really think it'll make any difference?
I don't know.
They have this ritual that's sort of like an initiation for like a frat, in which all of the freshman guys have to run out into the playing field in their pajamas, and all of the seniors try to, they run the gauntlet, and the seniors try to rip their pajamas off them.
Sister Boy isn't like you anymore.
See? No one's going to get hurt.
And nobody wanted to rip his off because they were afraid they'd be associated with being a homosexual. And so finally, Darryl Hickman, who's his roommate, comes and rips his pajamas off just to save face. And this whole thing is watched by Deborah Kerr and her husband just loves it. He's really into it. And you watch her watching him, and you realize that she sort of thinks that he's got issues of his own.
Hey.
Oh, look now, nobody ever gets hurt in this thing.
It'd be a pity to spoil the record.
Oh, come on, it's all in fun.
Minnelli had faced a lot of these problems himself in his own life. He was very effeminate, and when he got assigned this, because Kazan said right away, I'm never going to make a movie out of this because they're never going to do it right. Never. So they immediately signed Minnelli. It was either going to be George Cukor or Minnelli. That was sort of a given with this particular topic. And then they just continued. The Breen office just kept saying no, 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 no. And they kept watering it down. But what Minnelli decided to do was to get the theme across through the use of set decorations and color schemes. I know that sounds strange, but he managed to pull it off.
Curtains? You spend your allowance on this kind of thing?
Well, I try to make it look more like a home, yeah.
When Darryl Hickman, who is Tom's roommate, comes to teach him to walk like a man, he goes to the music room where Tom hangs out, and there's a beautiful grand piano and a bust of Beethoven, and it's all tastefully decorated. The colors are very kind of muted and calming, and there's classical music playing on the record player, and he tries to teach him to walk like a guy.
Well?
You look sort of...
All of a sudden he knows how ridiculous it is, and he goes, oh hell, I don't know what I'm doing, to the effect of, you know.
I don't get it.
Well, sort of...
Well, show me.
Oh, I can't do it.
I'm just trying to help you get through this, and you know, Tom Reel says, yeah, I know.
The varsity outing, Sister Boy, what happened? All right, you guys, all right, that's enough. Lay off, come on. I don't know.
It's about bullying, and he's been bullied to the point where he can hardly stand it.
Sister boy! Oh, well, no wonder! Sister boy! I should have known! Why would
And Deborah Kerr finds him in this wooded area and says, I don't believe that you are a homosexual. And he says, everybody says so. And she slowly gets down and she looks at him and she starts to unbutton her blouse and she says,
years from now, when you talk about this, and you will, be kind.
And she sleeps with him. Now, that's the end of the play. In the movie, because she had to be punished for sleeping out of wedlock to breaking her marriage and sleeping with him, he's come back after 10 years and he revisits the house where all of this happened, and it's all done in flashbacks. The husband now is living alone and listens to classical records because she has said to the husband, I think that one of the reasons that you hate Tom so much is that he reminds me of you because I saw those same characteristics in you. And he lives alone and he listens to classical records.
I used to sit in my room and listen to phonograph records hour after hour. I had a place where I used to go and cry my eyes out.
And he hands Tom a letter that she wrote, and she divorced him, and she's living, nobody knows where she is. She lives somewhere in the Midwest, and she says, you wrote a beautiful novel about our relationship and you made me a heroine. I wasn't a heroine. She said, well, maybe it was the biggest mistake of my life, but I just had to take it because I didn't know how else to convince you. And I'm glad that you got married. I'm glad you have a son, but this destroyed my life and my marriage. So she had to be punished according to the Breen office.
All you're supposed to do is once in a while give the boys a little tea.
Tea and sympathy.
You remember
yes,
that?
I remember.
Minnelli was sort of disappointed, was very disappointed with the outcome of this movie. But later on, he sort of was proud of it. And he said at one point, I directed the first homosexual movie with a homosexual theme, TEA and Sympathy.
Oh, you sound like quite an authority.
You know, with all of the films that come out, that have come out on gay topics, you know, and stuff, this one, for the 1950s, was trying to handle it in the best way possible. Tennessee Williams had cornered the market on this kind of topic from the very beginning, and Broadway was very lenient with it. In Streetcar Named Desire, there's the sensitive young man that Blanche was in love with. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, you know, Brick is in love with his old friend. Suddenly Last Summer, there's, you know, Sebastian Venable, Sebastian, Violet, Sebastian, you know. And so there was this was always a topic. Even William Inge had stuff like this, sort of at the dark at the top of the stairs and stuff. But Broadway was lenient. And when they would sell these projects to Hollywood, Hollywood would say, well, we bought this. You know, they bought this play for $150,000 they paid for TEA and Sympathy. It had run for over 700 performances. And then they just proceeded to water it down because they were too afraid.
What is this anyway?
It's a quiz. Are you masculine?
Oh, well, how am I doing?
So far, so good.
You know, between the Breen office and the Catholic Legion of Decency, if they put their mark on it, the film was dead. And every single time they go, nope, this has to be taken out. Nope, this has to be taken out. That's why other directors tried to, Hitchcock would always try to get around things like this. You know, Hitchcock had so many homosexual characters in his films that he got around it. And they would creatively get around it. Minnelli's use of getting around it was to use a visual motif to get around it, to visually tell you one thing that the dialogue was telling you another.
Here, keep it. It's yours. See ya.
But this film has a sensitivity. The acting is wonderful. It bears merit because it shows us where we're going in the face of where we've been. And in many ways, at this particular juncture, how far we've got to go. Sit back and take a look at Deborah Kerr, John Kerr, and Leif Erickson, and Darryl Hickman in Vincente Minnelli's Tea and Sympathy. Happy Gay Pride.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's
Pride and Prejudice. Sense and Sensibility. Stop it. I know. Well,